Welcome to another episode of Issues and Insights. I'm Bryce Shumate from Hardin County Government, and today I'm kind of sitting on the other side because we're going to do something just a little bit different. Last year in November when we had our ice storm, we learned some different things that we need to get out to the public. So today I'm actually going to switch roles and be one of the persons that's being interviewed, and Sarah Fellows from Nolin RECC is going to be doing our interviewing along with Greg Lee, the CEO from Nolin RECC. Thank you all for being part of our show today. And Sarah, thank you for conducting the interview.
Glad to do it.
And the reason we're doing this is because there's information that we need to not only get from Nolin RECC, but also from emergency management and emergency services and what to do when you call 911 and those types of things. So, Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Well, and I think this is an important conversation because not only what Nolin and the other power supplier in the area and Hardin County government do in an emergency or in a weather situation, that's very important. But what people can do prepping for that and during that time is also a big part of what we're going to be talking about today.
And I think that prep prepares everybody, gets everybody ready for that so that when an emergency does happen, it's not a panic attack that goes on and they're freaking out because they don't have power, they don't have their other utilities. And if we go back to 2009, it wasn't just electricity that was off. We lost just about every utility that we had because it depended on electricity.
Right. So really that preparation, like you said, is a huge part of that. So that's really where our conversation will start today. And so Bryce, because you deal with all emergency services for Hardin County, I just want you to talk a little bit about what are the big things that people can do to prepare for that. And we can go into details of some of those, but what are some of the big things that are a real concern?
You know, Sarah, FEMA used to tell everybody to prepare a survival kit for 3 days. Well, after looking at the emergencies across the United States, many times, Greg, it's as much as 7 days before first responders can get to you. It's not just 3 days. So we tell everybody have enough food, have enough water, have enough medical supplies, to last you 7 days. And you got to think it, we just laughed and talked about pets before we went on the air. You've got to have enough supplies to take care of your pets, and that can't be just food. It's got to be, you got to be thinking about enough water as well. So, I have as many as 2 to 3 cases of water at my house all the time just in case, but I'm constantly thinking about those emergencies, and that's one reason why we want to have this today. And here's something else. ATMs don't work when the electricity's out or our services are out. So we also tell people have a little bit of a cash supply because things are going to be cash only because ATMs aren't working, card readers aren't working. You can't run a check through the identification processes that they do at all the stores now. So you need to have a little bit of cash supply set back. Make sure your medications are up to date enough so that if you do have some type of outage, you've got enough medication to do that, to make it through that. So a good guide is to go to the FEMA website and look and see what all it asks you to put down there for your emergency kit, and then pick a place in your house that you can put it. Like mine's in my storage room.
Right.
And here's something that people don't think about because they've gotten used to electric can openers. Make sure that with your canned food that you have, because those are the easiest, those are most of our non-perishable things, have yourself an old time, as many people would say, manual can opener so that you can get into those things and be able to utilize them.
And radio with backup batteries, a flashlight, and maybe even now, one of the things with electronics and technology, having some sort of battery-powered storage so that you have some sort of reserve. And that's not something you can keep down in your storage room because you have to keep it charged, but have something that has some charge to it so that you can plug things in when you need them.
And some of the places even have the crank-up chargers
for
your radio and so on, that you can keep those kind of things going. So there's so many things, and that's why I say if you go to the FEMA site, it'll give you all kinds of information about what you should have.
So, Greg, when a major winter outage, for example, might happen and power goes out, so Nolin is a little bit different because of kind of reporting when that happens. Can you talk about what needs to happen on a member's side for Nolin, but how that might differ, say, if they have KU?
Yeah, so I'll just speak on the Nolin piece, but for all of our Nolin members, one of the great things that we have in place now is our integrated AMI system. And what that is a system by which we have communication with our meters at each individual's home and business on a regular basis. So with 99.9% accuracy, we know if someone's power is on or off, and there is an instantaneous notification sent back to our dispatch center, and we utilize that notification to determine whether or not we are going to send someone out to go investigate further. So during a widespread outage event, we will have a lot of these notifications coming in, and there is some logic built into this program that actually allows us to know if those meters that are calling in as off are close to each other or next to each other. So this logic will group these meter outages together so that we will be able to predict the devices that are actually damaged or where the lines might be down. It's really not necessary for members to contact us to let us know that their power is out. Mm-hmm. We almost always know that. Now, what is useful to us is if they have seen an electrical fire, or if they have observed down lines or poles that are broke. Those are useful pieces of information, and we would certainly like for people to contact us and let us know when that's happened so that we can enter that into the notes, and it might expedite being able to send people to the right place without having to do any further investigation to find the problem.
Right, so if we have a broken pole, we already know that that's what needs to go out, as opposed to someone going to check it and say, okay, well, now we have to go back and get all of this material.
Right.
So we already know that that's
It gives
happening.
us some certainty of at least what part of the problem may be.
And Sarah, that brings up another point. If it's in somebody's yard, then it's more apt to get a call from the service member to let you all know, calling 911 to say it's broken in their yard, unless it's causing a fire or a medical emergency. People were calling 911 during the last outage telling us, their personal was out. And like Greg said, you all knew that already, so they don't have to call 911 to tell us their personal. But 911 receives is Muldrow Hill open when it snows?
Right.
So those kind of things are, things that we wouldn't necessarily need to know on 911. That's something you all need to know.
Right. Right, and I wanted to differentiate with KU just because I don't believe that is the case for them. So if you're not a Nolin member, you still may have to call. But if you are a Nolin member, that's specific to us, that you don't necessarily have to call because we're going to know, unless it's something like you said, that they can give information. And I noticed also in that last storm that we had that people wanted to talk to a live human being. But for us, our IVR system, our recorded system, actually gathers all of that information, and that information goes into our system straight to dispatch. So it's not that they're not getting their message across. It actually might even be more efficient to call into that system because then they can get that very specific information into our system.
Right. One of the things that, you hit the nail on the head with efficiency. That's one of the things that I'm most interested in seeing, that we can be as efficient as possible when trying to get these outages restored. Ultimately, that's what it all comes down to. One of the things that we noted during the November 2018 ice storm, where we had people off for 4 or 5 days, was that there were a few of the parameters in our IVR system that we needed to tweak. Unfortunately, one of the things that was happening part of the time is people were getting a notification when they called in that their power had been restored. Now, we actually knew that their power had not been restored, but the automated program was telling them that it had. So we went to work right away to try to get things like that fixed. What's important for people to understand is if we commit a lot of manpower to answering phones, that takes a lot of time that we would otherwise not be able to actually carry out the work of restoring the power. Right. Not only that, but once the information is received, it has the person's personal twist on it that was taking the call. They have to document the notes. Then it has to be sorted somehow to be given to the dispatcher. If it's entered in IVR, all of that happens right away.
Right.
And it goes straight to the dispatcher, and they can lump these outages together, and that lets our crews get things done much more efficiently and effectively.
So the more information they can give us through that system, the better.
Certainly, yes.
And if you're calling 911, then we're in turn calling you all.
Right.
Then that blocks everything up on you all. Now, I don't want people to think, well, we can't call 911.
Right.
Certainly, if there is a line down in the road that's arcing, and we've all had a conversation, you all know, we've all had a conversation about this we've been working on this for over a year to talk about all this. You know, if a line is arcing in the roadway, then that presents a community danger, and I have to send first responders there to keep people off of that until you all can get there.
Right.
And that would be something that I would be letting you all know, because you may not know, even though you know that power is off at the house, you may not know that the line is down in the road, correct? I mean, your system wouldn't.
And the things that we would certainly expect folks to contact 911 for would be imminent public safety threats or medical emergencies.
Right.
We get calls sometimes from folks who are oxygen supplement dependent,
Right.
or have some other medical needs on a recurring basis that they need electricity for. Obviously, despite our best efforts, we cannot guarantee anyone 100% uptime on their electrical supply. And if you're having a medical emergency and you're contacting us, we're going to be doing everything we can to get your power back on, but we don't want people to take any sense of comfort that we're going to get it in time that their medical consideration will be resolved. They need to be contacting 911
And that would be a
and
time
seeking
when they
attention.
would call 911, and we'd be sending EMS or some other first responder either to get them transported to a treatment facility or to a shelter where they do have electricity so that they can run their oxygen machines or whatever electrical device they need to, to take care of their health. So,
Well, and I think that's part of the conversation around prepping too. If there's any way that you can prepare ahead for that, have
Sure.
a backup generator, have something that, knowing that you have to rely on electricity and knowing that there's just no way to guarantee that 100% of the time, what can you do in advance of that to keep it from being an emergency?
or even a pre-plan of calling, if this happens, I'm going to call a family member, and this is the family member I'm going to call, and this is their phone number, because they're going to be able to get me to where I need to go.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a motel that's got electricity in another town, or whatever that. But like you said, Sarah, if you're pre-planning that, then we don't have the overload that we had on 2018 with our phone system and your all's phone system, because our number one goal is to take care of everybody and make sure that they're safe and get their electricity back on or their utility back on as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure everybody understands as safely as possible.
That's
too,
right.
because we don't want to endanger any of your folks, even though it is imperative to, we've become totally dependent on that electricity.
Right.
It is imperative that your all's workers are safe. Mm-hmm. And when you start talking about the generator, if folks do get a generator, they need to get a device that will stop that generator power from going once their regular electricity comes back on, because it could generate electricity out through the transmission lines and actually hurt one of your all's workers, and that's one thing we've got to be careful about.
So, and I'll carry on
Please.
with that. I can give a little bit more detail on that topic. One of the things that is a hazard for our folks that we're always very concerned about for our linemen whenever we have a storm like this are the individual home level generators generating power back on to the utility lines that our guys are restoring. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's an electrocution hazard, no different than if our line was energized normally. One of the things that is very important for folks to know is that if they're going to have a home level, residence level, or business level generator installed, it needs to be done by a licensed electrician. It will have built-in technology that serves as a utility disconnect or an automated transfer switch, by which when the generator engages power and serves the facility, it is electrically isolated from the utility. That's very important for us. A lot of folks also use these smaller portable generators during these times that we don't have electrical supply. If those are going to be utilized, they either need to be done on a basis where there has been a licensed electrician and an inspection performed such that there is a transfer switch that isolates at the service panel level in someone's residence or business, or they just need to use it as a standalone device outside, and then they can take an extension cord and plug in individual appliances as necessary.
Right.
One of the other important things, we obviously, for our folks, have the concern of electrocution from these generators, but for each person at their business or their home, they have the carbon monoxide threat. So it is so important that these devices that produce carbon monoxide, these generators, be left outside in an area that is not capturing these gases, that a person is going to be occupying that space and potentially have that hazard.
And Greg, it's funny that you're coincidence that you bring that up. This morning I got an email from Kentucky Hospital Corporation talking about how in the wintertime that goes up because of outages and people running their generator in a closed-in facility, or they'll stick it in their garage and start it up thinking, I don't want anybody to steal my generator. Well, if you're worried about that, take a chain and a lock and lock it to something outside that you can't move. Don't put it inside where the fumes are feeding back inside your house. I mean, you know.
Well, and that adds to the discussion too about heating devices. So if you do have an outage and you're needing, or if your home just needs extra heat during the winter, safely doing that. I mean, one of those, I know we grew up with like a kerosene heater in our house. I'm not terribly sure how safe it was when it was all closed up in our basement, but talk a little bit about that. If they need alternate heating sources for whatever reason, what are some safe things to keep in mind?
Talk about pre-planning. That's major pre-planning. Get with your local fire department. Talk to them about what you have for alternate heat and let them give you some advices about ventilation for those devices and what it requires. Also having a CO detector in the house so it can pick up when you've got those dangerous levels in the house so that you know that you need to get out. You know, like for us, we have a wood-burning stove with a blower on it, and Greg made mention that, you know, if you've got a portable generator, use it as a standalone device, and that's what we do. I use it to plug in the blower on the wood stove just because it's heating my house. The rest of it I don't care about, you know. But that is one of those things where, you know, we keep it going, and I actually do chain it to something outside so that it doesn't go away. But, you know, make that pre-plan again. We keep falling back on that. And so while you're able to think now and while you're watching this show, start writing down some of the things that we're talking about so that you can pre-plan some of this.
And so, kind of going back to some of the safety issues, if someone does come upon a line that's down, and sometimes it may be an electrical line, sometimes it might be a phone line, it could be a cable service, but the common person, like when I looked at a line, I may not know the difference. What are some just general safe practices that if you do come on a down line, what's the safest thing to do?
Well, and like you said, Sarah, most people who aren't in our industry don't necessarily know the difference between an electric line, a cable line, a telephone line, and that's okay. The safest thing to do is don't go closer for further investigation. An electrical line, if it's still energized and is on the ground, will sometimes be sparking, will sometimes be arcing, but sometimes it won't either, and that's really what gets people in trouble. So don't ever go closer for further investigation. The best thing to do is contact Nolin RECC or Kentucky Utilities or any other utility that may be serving that industry that could be the responsible party for that asset. And they'll go out and they'll make the assessment and then figure out what to do with it.
Okay. And you know, Greg's right. It is extremely dangerous when people start thinking about, you know, that looks like a telephone line to me, and go over there and grab it.
Right.
You know, it is extremely dangerous. Now, again, if it's down in the roadway, we want them to call 911 as well so I can get emergency responders so we don't get people there touching it or running over it. You know, and that actually happened in our 2018 time frame of ice storm. People were curious and they were going up. I had first responders on scenes that were yelling at people to stay back, and people kept walking toward them.
Wow.
So, you know, the first clue is there's lights flashing, whether it's your yellow lights from your all's vehicles or red and blue lights from our vehicles. it's got to be a dangerous scene, or else
Right.
we wouldn't be there.
Well, and the tendency of the human condition is to go toward that.
Exactly.
I want to see what's happening, but
Curiosity
don't.
killed the cat.
Right,
It will
right,
us too, you know,
right.
if we're not careful.
Right.
One of the other, not necessarily common hazards, but certainly too common, because it is very, very dangerous, is that when we have a downed line on a vehicle and we have an entrapment situation and someone is in that vehicle, if you are in a circumstance like that, do not try to get out.
Right.
Wait in place, and if someone is coming towards you to try to help, wave them off. Either you or they should contact 911. Absolutely, but do not attempt to get yourself out of that circumstance, because if you do, you may experience one of those electrocution hazards.
And Sarah, sometimes people say, hey, my phone's turned off. I can't call 911. I'm out of minutes. I'm out of time. 911 on your cell phone works all the time. Does it make any difference whether that cell phone is connected to a cell service or not? Just as soon as you turn it on, that cell phone has power, it has the capabilities of dialing 911 and will come through and get first responders. So.
Well, and the vehicle safety, I think, is another thing in terms of preparation during the winter. I know if anyone was stuck on I-65 during some of the terrible weather we had, you know that it's important to also be prepared to be in your car for an extended period of time.
Right.
And that's water, again, maybe some high-calorie snacks, some blankets, things that are going to keep you. And
old coat and gloves.
Especially if you have children, to keep that kind of thing on you. And a charger, so that you can charge your phone if you still have battery.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because now they're even saying a small shovel, windshield washer fluid, because think about it, we're using it quite a bit when we're trying to get all the salt mix off of our car. All of these things are a great vehicle wintertime safety kit. And don't forget a first aid kit.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
you know, we need it not only when we make our home kit, but the kit that we use in our vehicle as well. It doesn't hurt to put a little bit of salt or cat litter in there so that your vehicle can get some traction. So I think one of the things that we really want to get out to people, and our time has gone by really fast.
I know it has. I'm looking at it.
You
We have a
know,
little bit of time.
we wanted to make sure that we talked about this so that people knew the difference to whether to call you all, the utility company, more specifically Nolin RECC versus 911.
And just as we kind of start to wrap up a little bit, I know one of the big questions that happens in an outage is first of all, I always feel like I'm the last one to come on. No matter who I am, I feel like I'm definitely the last house that came on. But there is a process to restoring that power, and there's a very logical rhyme to that reason. Just real briefly, could you talk about what that is?
Sure. You know, it's a funny thing that you mentioned there, because one of the things that I hear a lot after an outage event is someone will say, well, I saw Nolin trucks drive by my house 2 or 3 times before my power was actually restored. We start with the outages that we believe will cause the most people to be restored, and then work our way down to the smaller, and then eventually into the individual level outages. For any given person at their residence, they may have an issue at the substation feeding their home. They may have an issue on the main circuit coming off of that substation. They may have an issue on the tap coming off of that main circuit, or they may have an individualized issue on the service coming off of that tap or that transformer that feeds their specific home. In a catastrophic event like an ice storm, they may have all of the above. So what we do, you take the biggest chunks you can from the beginning and you work your way down. So we start at the substation level. If it's a substation outage, obviously it doesn't matter what else we do until that is fixed. So we'll get that taken care of, and then we start working on the main line. So yes, it's unfortunate for some individuals that all of their neighbors may be back on and they're still sitting there in the dark. We're not intentionally leaving anyone off. It's just a function of, is there an individualized issue for that person versus everyone else only experiencing the more widespread outage.
And it may not be your all's problem. It may be that they have to get their own electrician to fix their drop.
And that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. Whenever we reach the service point, the actual where the meter base is on the home, there are certain assets there that are the responsibility of the utility, are the responsibility of Nolin RECC, and there are some things that are responsibility of the homeowner. We have some good literature that helps helps delineate who is responsible for what, that we try to educate people with. And certainly if we're at someone's home and the damaged assets are their responsibility, we have a door hanger or a flyer that we will leave for them that will explain to them what they need to do before we come back and fix everything for them.
Yeah.
And you know, I like the way you started this out, because I'm actually a Nolin RECC customer, and the 2009 ice storm, my house was one of the last ones, and the reason I say that is not because I'm complaining, it's because people think because I'm a first responder
Right.
that my house is one of the first ones turned on, and that's not so. That's not the case. You all have got a plan on how to get those things on. It's not you go to the influential folks
Right.
and turn theirs on first.
Right.
That's not the way it works.
Right. It's not that it always works with 100% perfection, because it is an extremely chaotic circumstance, but it's not a haphazard approach either. There is a lot of rhyme and reason and logic behind how we make those decisions.
So as we finish up our time, for people to stay connected and to stay informed is really the big thing during any kind of a situation like this, and also especially to be prepared going to the FEMA website. But in terms of communication, Nolin, I get to talk on this because this is what I get to do, but we do have very active social media presence, and we have a website. So we try and keep our members as updated as possible. And then as far as staying up to date with things countywide,
County
how would they do that?
website, Hardin County HCEC-TV.org is the county website. We put things out on the county website, but we also have a Facebook page that we will put information out. My personal Facebook page, I'm constantly putting information out, about anything that we've got going on with a natural disaster or a man-made disaster that so have. But we post all that as it's going on, and I know you all do as well. And we'll also be utilizing the media. The radio stations, because radio is the most commonly listened to when we have a disaster, because you may not have cable TV. And those folks that have antennas, they may actually have local stations, and so we utilize some of the locals. But if you remember back in 2009, the Louisville stations couldn't get down here
Right.
to do anything like that. So we were putting that out on radio for folks. So, Sarah, this is important information to get out, and we want to stress to people that our whole goal here is safety.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you. Thanks for letting me come and join your conversation today, and thanks for the work that you do for this community.
And thank you all for being part of this. I appreciate so much you all doing this, and we want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and stay safe during the Christmas holidays, because even though we try to make things nice and pretty for our home, we've got electrical things on trees that can go up just like that. So we want to make sure people stay safe
Right.
and enjoy the holidays.
Right. Well, this has been Issues and Insights along with Bryce and Greg. I'm Sarah Fellows.